And now I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker this morning. Um, Pete Sinisgalli is the president and CEO of Manhattan Associates, which is in the business of supply chain management software and systems. Manhattan Associates is headquartered here in Atlanta. Pete joined Manhattan in March of 2004 as its president and COO, and he very quickly took over the role of CEO a few months later. All told, he has more than 20 years experience in finance and general management in both public and private companies. Immediately before joining Manhattan Associates, Pete spent a year with New Roads, Inc., a third-party fulfillment provider where he was president and CEO. And prior to that, he was president and COO of CheckFree Corporation, another Atlanta headquarters company. Pete joined CheckFree in 1996. In the early part of Pete's career, he spent a span of about 14 years at Dun & Bradstreet Corporation, where he rose to Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Pete's a graduate of Cornell, where he got his undergraduate degree in economics and completed an MBA in 1992. And today he's here to talk to us about the challenges of managing a global supply chain. With that, I'll introduce Pete Sinisgalli.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces. For those of you I haven't met yet, look forward to getting a chance to chat with you once we get a chance for a break. I moved to Atlanta about a decade ago, joined D&B Software. I'd been with Dun & Bradstreet for a while. Joined D&B Software next door. What was pretty cool about it, D&B Software had the whole building in those days, and was a vibrant company in the 90s and trying to find its way when I joined in the mid-90s, but was very exciting about it. Technology companies are kind of fun, they're young, and everyone seems to be enjoying themselves. And the story about the building was that, boy, if these walls could talk, the stories they would tell you. Well, being right next door to that building today, I still think I can hear some of those stories, and I'm not so sure you'd want to know the details behind those. Very nice to be here at the Terry School. I always enjoy speaking to groups, but also particularly college-like audience and people that have a bond together. And I sort of feel like I'm developing my own sort of bond with the University of Georgia. Cornell, for those of you that don't know, its colors are almost identical to UGA, and so there's a nice little bond there. But probably more importantly, yesterday and today, my son is up in Athens for orientation. He begins school there in August, so very excited about that. He's a lot smarter than his father. I tried to convince him to go to other schools to think about it, and he was early accepted to Georgia and didn't complete another application, so he's a very smart young man. What I'm here to talk with you about this morning is some of the challenges of managing a global supply chain. You read the newspaper any day, talk to any business you're in, and there are compression in almost all industries on almost all businesses to adapt better, faster, cheaper. One way companies are trying to do that is through optimization of their supply chains. So that's what I'm here to speak with you about this morning. I'll try not to make this a Manhattan commercial. I'll give you a couple of quick anecdotes about Manhattan Associates and our role in trying to optimize supply chains, but talk more broadly about some of the major implications of competition in the world, competition in industries, and more demands from customers on optimizing supply chains. Before I jump into the canned presentation, though, just a quick story. I might not get the facts exactly right, but I'll get them directionally correct to give you some sense of the benefits or the implications of not managing your supply chain well. A few years ago, there was a consumer goods company. Among the products that they manufactured were frozen peas. Turned out there was a good harvest for peas that year, and that company bought a lot of peas, produced a lot of frozen peas, and recognized they had too much inventory of frozen peas. Challenge for them, what do you do with all this inventory? Well, you talk to the buyers at the grocers who are your customers to see if you can move more peas. The seller gets on the phone, calls up a bunch of different grocery firms, talks to one buyer, and says, I've got a deal for you. You normally buy about 50,000 cases of frozen peas each period. If you increase your order by 10, 500,000 frozen pea cases, I'll cut the price per case in half. The buyer takes a moment, goes into his little database, pulls up an Excel spreadsheet, recognizes that they're forecasting enough demand over the next 6 months or so to likely use up all those peas. Sure, I'll buy those peas. Now, the problem was that buyer never took the time or had the systems in place to talk with anyone else in their supply chain. So he ordered 500,000 cases of frozen peas. A few days later, a couple of truckloads of frozen peas show up at their warehouse. The person running the warehouse had no advance notice that they were buying more than the usual allotment of 50,000 cases and had no room in the refrigerated part of the warehouse for all of these peas. Warehouseman panics, doesn't know what to do, and talks to the trucking company who had these trailer loads of frozen peas and asks them if they'll leave the trailers with him for a couple of days so they can figure out what to do with all these peas. Otherwise, they'll melt and have to be discarded. Very expensive, by the way, if you want to lease on a day-to-day basis a refrigerated truck from a trucking company. Very, very expensive. But they had no other choice. So the trucker left the trailer and drove off in his cab and said, "I'll be back when you're done with it, and we'll bill you for it." Well, the warehouseman, trying to figure out a lower cost solution than leveraging these trailers for a couple of days, calls around town, finds another warehouse that is refrigerated that can take on all these extra peas, leases some space on a short-term basis. Sure, you can do that, but it's wildly expensive. Calls the trucking company, come get your trailers, bring them over to the other refrigerated warehouse. They store them there for a week or two while they're trying to figure out what's the next step. They decide that the carrying cost in this leased refrigerated warehouse greatly exceeds the profit they can make on all these additional peas. Work with each of their grocery stores and decide best way to handle this is to have a promotion on frozen peas to try to move some of the inventory. So they decide they're going to have a 2-for-1 sale. Buy one, get one free. So they push a lot of the frozen peas out to the grocery stores, move a lot of the peas, and are able to reduce the cost in their supply chain for having all this excess inventory. Downside, of course, is the buyer thought he was doing the company a great favor, getting all these peas, which were in the forecast at a substantially reduced cost. Problem was they had no visibility, no communication with any other part of their supply chain. So they lost substantial money on what appeared to be a great opportunity. And that's just one story. There are thousands of stories like that. Talk to any consumer goods company, any retailer. There are thousands of situations where the right hand and the left hand don't communicate very well and leads to suboptimal results. So I'll talk with you a little bit about some of the implications, some of the issues we're wrestling with as an industry, and what we can do about it. By the way, anyone want to guess what happened to the person that bought all those peas, the buyer? Got a huge bonus, actually. The way their incentive system worked was he got paid on a price per unit basis as long as his purchase was within the overall forecast for the company. So he got a huge bonus, went around feeling like a very successful person, and the company lost a ton of money on all those frozen peas. Now, that company has fixed that particular issue, but there's many, many more like that. So with that, let me begin. I've got a couple of little clips that I'm going to use in the presentation. Here's a little bit of a piece that we used a couple of weeks ago. We had our user conference in Las Vegas and shared this little piece with folks as sort of an overview of the supply chain industry. Sound? Okay.
Embrace it so we can understand its impact. As the supply chain becomes the key determinant in a company's success, we must continue to innovate. Collectively, we have helped make supply chain innovations become the largest contributor to the overall value creation across leading global enterprises. We must embrace the new trends and best practices that will continue to fuel our own success. Micro-marketing and dynamic network allocation, global supply chain visibility, lean supply chain processes, partner consolidation, demand-driven forecasting, and centralized decision-making. Innovation, leadership, value creation. A dynamic combination of forces that fuel supply chain excellence. Value through innovation.
Quick definition for you, for those of you that aren't familiar with the supply chain management space. There are a lot of component parts to supply chain management. This is an overview, summarized overview of the general landscape for supply chain management. Basically, on the left side of the screen would be generally considered demand. So demand creation, trying to predict, forecast demand. And on the right side of the screen are some of what's called the execution components of supply chain management. So everything from demand to consumption is the general kind of categories that folks talk about supply chain. If you've followed the space, you probably have heard of supply chain planning as one major category, and supply chain execution. Generally, what that refers to is the planning part is like any other part of a business, a financial plan, a business plan, a marketing plan. You try to predict what will likely happen in your business going forward, develop detailed plans that take advantage of your prediction, and that would be your plan. Same is true for supply chain. And then, of course, you need to be able to execute on that plan. And in our case, for supply chain management, that execution are things like ordering, shipping, distributing, warehousing. So those are the general component parts of supply chain management. Now, what surprised me, I've only been in the logistics space for about 4 years. I was surprised at the overall size of the spend for supply chain, for logistics. For the US alone, almost 9% of our GDP is spent on logistics. It's a huge number. Our case, 1.5 trillion. And the United States is the most efficient supply chain in the world. So every other nation spends more than 9% of their GDP moving products around. So a great opportunity to be more efficient. Now, some of the other things that are real motivators to try to improve the way you manage your supply chain. Currently, 8+% of the time you go to a store shelf to buy something, that something isn't there. It's a great opportunity to try to increase your satisfaction and a company's profitability. Now, the flip side of that, 8% of the time the product's not there, about a third of the time they've got too much of the product, that they've got to find some way to move excess inventory. The most likely way to do that is to reduce the price. Now, some of that is promotion. Some of that discounting is on promotions to try to encourage you to buy other things. But a big part of that price reduction or discount is because they have an improper match between demand and the supply that they forecasted. One of the things that I find fascinating, that inventory carrying costs equate to about 22% of overall cost for a company. That is a huge number. There's about $5.5 trillion tied up in global inventory. Now, one of the things I kind of find exciting, if you just think about I don't know how to even conceive anything starting with a trillion. It's a number that I don't have an ability to comprehend. But if you think about the math behind that, I don't think there's a logistician in the world that doesn't think there's at least an opportunity to take out 10% of global inventory. But if you think about the benefit to our companies of doing that, 10% of $5.5 trillion is $550 billion less inventory, with a carrying cost of about 10%, which would be very, very good, actually, for most companies. That's $55 billion of increased profits just by reducing inventory by 10%. And we believe there's at least that opportunity if we can manage supply chains more optimally on a global basis. And as we all know, the price of oil has gone up dramatically. It's likely to continue to go up, and therefore the cost of transportation continues to grow rapidly. These are some issues that companies are trying to better think through. Now, complicating that are some other pressures on companies around the world. These pressures aren't unique to supply chain management. They're affecting every business, but have profound impacts on supply chain management. Everything from next generation technologies, the desire to work more closely with your business partners and integrate with them, global outsourcing, channel convergence, basically talks about retailing, cataloging, web-based e-commerce opportunities have profound impacts on how to best manage a supply chain, cost, regulation, and shorter product life cycle. And these two, I think, have specific implications for those that manage supply chains. there are tremendous opportunities to reduce the cost per unit by offshoring manufacturing. We've all heard about the difference in labor rates between India and China, how much is being produced in China, and the economic benefit of lower cost of production. Unquestionably true. But as we all know, if you're manufacturing offshore, you're adding cycle time to the amount of lead time necessary to get product to market. At a minimum 4 weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks, in many cases longer than that. That's highly complicated by our consumers' desire for instant gratification. It wasn't long ago when most retailers ran their business 2 seasons, 4 seasons, in most cases 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, and managed their plans as well as their execution based on those 4 seasons. It's no longer that way. Most of us believe there's probably 12, in some cases 24 seasons. Many retailers are working on a 12 or more frequent season business cycle. If you're trying to factor that into an extended supply chain and adding 6 or 8 weeks to your ordering and delivery cycle, those two just don't mesh up very well. So if you're not planning more accurately, ordering more accurately, and getting product to market more effectively, you're going to miss those windows. A good customer of Manhattan Associates, J. Crew, runs its business now on 12 product cycles because their customers demand it. And they believe if they're not delivering on that, one of their competitors will. So they've got some significant challenges in managing supply and demand, better forecasting demand, hooking it up with better, matched up with better supply to make sure they're earning your confidence and trust. As I suggested, these issues aren't unique to supply chain management. They have the same or like implications for companies in every business, but they have profound implications for the way we manage our supply chains. And I believe the companies that are aggressive and successful in managing these issues will be the companies that lead for the next decade. So how do companies generally try to manage this matching of demand and supply? Well, most companies start off, as I said, with this business plan and try to anticipate your needs for the next season or seasons and develop a supply-driven business plan to be able to deliver on that. They anticipate what you wish to buy, working with their distributors, manufacturers, and ultimately the suppliers, place orders for what they think you would like and have it pushed through their supply chain. So supply-driven push approach to managing customer expectations and the way they run their business. And in that world, most companies try to deal with volatility or events in their supply chain primarily by having extra inventory. So if there's a disruption, not enough in one store, too much in another, they stack additional inventory throughout their supply chain to better manage your expectations, so-called safety stock. And that's the way most companies had run their businesses for the last couple of decades, where most of their investment in their business went into inventory, with meaningful investment in transportation and some investment in information technology, information systems, to help them better manage that. But over the last decade or so, point-of-sale solutions have given companies much better information on what you are actually buying and how you'd like to deal with them. In addition to that, with globalization, offshoring, we've gone from a couple of suppliers, probably down the block, who manufactured goods for you, to many suppliers in many parts of the world, lengthening our supply chains. We've also contracted out with third parties to help design solutions for us, help us with marketing, help us build business plans that has added additional complexity to how we run our businesses. And we've outsourced meaningful parts of our supply chain, either trucking, shipping, delivery, distribution, to other parties through third-party logistics organizations, which adds another level of complexity. And lastly, you throw in things like e-commerce and web retailing, where 40% of what you buy over the web gets returned to companies, and returns management becomes an important increased complication for companies in trying to figure out how to manage their supply chains. So in this more complex world, companies are trying to figure out, how can I manage all of this, meet your needs, drive profitability, and beat competition? Obviously, selfishly for Manhattan Associates, we believe leading companies are trying to reduce the amount of inventory they put in this system by trying to avoid huge levels of safety stock throughout all of the supply chain through better management of information throughout their supply chains. So a big shift from going from safety stock to try to make sure they can meet your demands, to trying to anticipate your demands more accurately and have a dynamic supply chain that can respond to changes within that supply chain. Now, why would companies do that? Well, this is business one-on-one. All of us, whatever business we're in, we're expected to achieve improvements in shareholder value. At the end of the day, that's what we're all responsible for, and there's 3 simple ways to do that. Increase revenue, increase profits, lower costs, and better utilize our balance sheet, our assets within our company. Leveraging supply chain management can help you deliver better relationships with your customers, better matching demand with supply, improve your channels, whether it's web catalog or retailers, expand into new markets, etc. We can also help companies better manage the cost within their supply chain. Most warehouses have 300-400 people running around those warehouses trying to make sure they can pick, pack, put away most efficiently, and solutions can help them do that, as well as reducing transportation costs. And then finally, around asset utilization, better leveraging your trucks, better leveraging the inventory in your supply chain, better leveraging your relationships with third-party logistics companies that are helping you move product around the globe. Those are ways in which that can be done. And then just give you some perspective on why I think supply chain management is getting more and more attention, and why leading companies in almost every industry are those companies that manage their supply chains better than their competitors. The opportunity for improvement is substantial. I won't go through some of these statistics, but similar to what I suggested about inventory, the opportunity to reduce inventory has significant benefits for companies and how they manage their profit and loss statement and how they drive up shareholder value. These, if you think about the size of companies that work around the world, these are substantial benefits. And if you think about the companies that lead their industry, Walmart, for instance, Walmart's biggest competitive advantage, almost everyone will tell you, is not that they're a great retailer. It's not that they are smarter than everyone else. Walmart's clear, sustainable competitive advantage is they have the most efficient supply chain on the planet. They beat their competitors by doing these things better, faster, cheaper, smarter. US clearly, and they're trying to do it on a global basis. Another great example of that, although they're struggling a little bit at the moment, is Dell Computer. Many folks consider Dell to be a technology company. I think a lot of folks, myself included, think of them much more as a distribution company. They have the most refined supply chain management solution in the world for high-tech companies. And you've probably heard this somewhere before. Dell has a negative working capital. They have no inventory. They require their vendors to manage inventory and only use it as they have demand for it. So they're actually billing you before they're even getting billed by their suppliers. A very sophisticated supply chain for Dell Computer. And obviously, all of their competitors are being forced to try to match that. So tremendous benefits if you can manage that effectively. So now just a quick commercial for Manhattan Associates. We've been around for about almost 20 years. Founded, it's a strange name for a logistics company. We were actually founded in Manhattan Beach, California. So that's where the name came from. It sounds a lot like it should be a New York law firm, but we're actually a logistics company. It was too expensive to change the name earlier, and it's actually caught on a little bit, gives us some cachet, so we're going to stick with it at least for the time being. And our aspiration is to be the global leader, tech solutions, to help companies optimize their supply chains. It's a pretty ambitious goal, given the relative landscape and the competition, but we think we're pretty well positioned to be able to do that. We've been pretty successful over the last bunch of years. Revenue growing more than 10% a year for the last decade or so. 26 offices in 13 countries. We like to claim for those companies that have global supply chains that we're a little like American Express, where everywhere you want to be. So we have resources in every market where there are meaningful global logistics opportunities and staffs there to try to help companies better address those opportunities. One of the things that I believe clearly differentiates us from most companies is we're spending a ton of money on R&D. Now, are there any the Wall Street research analysts that cover Manhattan in the audience? Yeah, good. I don't get a lot of credit with the Wall Street guys for the amount of money we spend in R&D. They'd like us to spend a little bit less. But I believe as the market's evolving, we have a great opportunity to take market share. So we're spending about 15% of revenue. Last year, about 40-something million. This year, closer to $50 million in R&D. And to have over 700 people in R&D. Like a lot of other tech companies, we opened a development center in India a few years ago. We have over 700 people in total in our Bangalore facility, helping us drive efficiencies and quality through our R&D efforts. I think you all understand this well. That's part of globalization. Adam Smith got it right many, many years ago when he said everyone benefits when we specialize. When we look for what competitive value can each of us, either companies, individuals, countries, states, and so forth, bring to a marketplace, the more we specialize, the more we're valued, the more quality of life can improve. And leveraging the technology capability and the cost advantage of developing and supporting product in India is a huge benefit to Manhattan Associates and helps us in the competitive landscape. A little bit about the overall market. It's a pretty large market. Most folks will tell you last year was about $5.5 billion. What gets us excited, we're the third largest player in the space behind SAP and Oracle, but none of us have dominant market share. Obviously, SAP and Oracle are a lot bigger than Manhattan Associates, but not very much bigger within supply chain management. So we think we've got a nice opportunity there to build out competitive advantage and continue to compete with them. We also partner with them, of course. We integrate into their back office systems. And then I guess you couldn't go through one of these presentations without a CEO throwing up their customer list. But what I'm excited about for Manhattan Associates, if you look at the customers that we have, and here are the vertical markets across the top where we have particular functional matches to those industries. I'd also suggest to you that the companies listed here are generally regarded as the leaders in supply chain management within their industry. So it's a nice list of very reputable market-leading companies. We have a little over 1,200 customers around the world, and this is just a representative list of some of those. One of the things that does disappoint me, we can't list some of our biggest, most impressive customers. We're not quite at the point where they're very happy to allow us to market their name, so you won't see Walmart on this list. I don't think we have Home Depot on this list or a number of other very visible companies around the world that have entrusted their supply chains to our technology, but we're thrilled to have this group allow us to market with them. And let me wrap up with one more little clip before I jump to Q&A. So to summarize, I do think there are some profound challenges, opportunities, implications for anyone who works in any business to better optimize the way they run their supply chains. Advances in information technology is making that easier. And I think there's some really cool things that the industry can do to make the quality of life around the globe more enjoyable. So thank you for listening to my prepared remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions anyone would like to ask. Please.
I'm going to ask if you could make sure you get a microphone so we can hear it on the webcast. That'd be great. And Jill's got one right here for our first question.
Good morning, and thank you for being here for us, sir.
Pleasure.
My question has to do with when a business is analyzing how much structures they should have so that they don't overbuy, but they don't underbuy. Do y'all do a risk analysis to find out that? And is there a sophisticated scenario analysis tool that is implemented and revisited? Or how does the process work?
Yeah. It's a great question. Thank you. And I didn't pay him to ask that question. Yes, there are. There are some very sophisticated tools to be used for managing global supply chains. You know, the objective of optimizing supply chain has been known for at least the last 50 years, probably longer. Folks at all of the leading academic institutions have been writing about dynamic logistics optimization and how you drive ideal supply chain effectiveness for a long time. There's a concept called the perfect order. It's been around for a long time, and that's getting the right product to the right place at the right time at the lowest possible cost. And there are tools to help you do that. So there are things that are called network design optimization. So before you try to optimize your supply chain, it helps to have an effective network in place to do that. So depending upon the size of the organization, you may need one global or US-based distribution center. You may need three. But depending upon the size of your business, there's some standard tools and some organizations to help support designing that supply chain network so you'll have the right ability to optimize. And once you have that network in place, and you can always adjust an existing network, there are some very specific tools for planning applications, merchandise planning, promotion planning, financial planning, and then the execution solutions that go behind that. But institutions like UGA, Georgia Tech, MIT, Purdue, Princeton, Cornell, and others, UGA, and others have been developing sophisticated algorithms for decades to help companies optimize how they manage balancing demand with supply. What I think has changed in the last decade or so, though, is the ability for information technology to take advantage of that thinking and put it into practice. Linking, collaborating, business partners around the world so that, frankly, if cotton shows up late in India, so the manufacturer of these garments can't get them to market to meet one of those 12 cycles that J. Crew is trying to match to, that the buyers at J. Crew can adjust their business plans and order more shirts from Eastern Europe and take advantage of that event and adapt to it. I think the advances in information technology are allowing companies to leverage the concepts that have been around for a long time and put them into practical reality. Sure. Please.
I know in this country there's been kind of a push as fuel costs rise towards more shipping over railway and by train and things like that. Can you talk about how your company maybe has adapted in the past and then plans to adapt in the future to ship and to distribute in a very cost-efficient way for your customers?
Great. It's a very good question. Anyone want to guess what the average age of a trucker in the United States is today? Average age. Was that? That's a pretty good guess. It's actually 59. The average truck driver is 59. So we currently have a driver shortage, and it's only going to get worse. So when we're thinking about how do we better get product to market, trying to factor in driver shortage is important. And frankly, you know, I'm in my 50s, so I have some compassion for folks in their 50s. But I'm not sure I want a lot of 60 and 70-year-olds driving around the highways in these big rigs with me or my kids driving next to them. So hours of service, there's government regulations that limit the number of hours drivers can drive without getting rest and so forth. True in the United States, but that's also true in other markets and will likely become true in almost a global perspective as more and more driver shortages occur. We do have application software. We call it transportation management solutions that help companies optimize their transportation networks. And we have a lot of competition in that space, so there are other good companies as well. That basically helps companies look at what they're trying to move from point A to point B, load trucks most efficiently, or load cars most efficiently on rail, and work with business partners to be able to do that in an optimized way that takes full advantage of drivers' availability, cabs availability, trailers availability, and also allows companies to do some of the things that are maybe not so obvious. The things I just described are pretty obvious. But the less obvious, if you're not in the logistics industry, how do you make sure that truck, after it drops off the merchandise you need to get to point B, doesn't come back empty? So how do you backhaul, pick up goods, merchandise, or work with another partner so you're not using capacity in a worthless manner? So that's one approach. Also, our application software knows the price of gas at every gasoline stop around the country. So when your driver's out there, they can use our solutions to buy gas at the most efficient place on their route. Pick the right route to drive and purchase gas, know where to stay overnight, and those type of things to optimize their transportation costs. It's a huge challenge with the price of oil where it is today, probably going higher. Better managing fleets, better managing carriers, and optimizing driver effectiveness is important. Now, one of the other challenges companies have, there's a shortage of drivers now. Drivers obviously are aware of that, and they're becoming more demanding. They don't want to drive certain routes anymore. So now you have to have incentive systems to be able to match drivers with loads, and application software is a way in which companies can do that to better optimize their business. But very sophisticated applications to help manage trucking, manage air, manage rail as well. And there's a whole suite of solutions for ocean as well. A little less complicated because you've got these huge container ships. So from an optimization perspective, a little less challenging to optimize, but it's obviously certainly challenging to manage on a day-to-day basis. Thanks.
I had a question. I had Drayton McLean as a client, and I got to tour some of the facilities that Walmart has. He's the one that designed and developed it all for the Sam Walton's family and for Sam. And I was just curious, when you look at a model like that, how much is transferable to your customer? Because they're huge. They've got a centralized location operation similar to, I guess, Federal Express or some of these big operators. How do you take what he's doing right and apply it to a smaller user?
Yeah, it's an important issue for the industry. One of the things that I'm careful of when we talk publicly about our customers, so we're very proud to have Walmart, since it's generally considered the supply chain leader, as a customer. We're very pleased to have companies like Home Depot in town, who's the number 2 and number 3, depending on who you talk to, probably number 3 global retailer as customers. But many of the other customers on that list will say that's great, but their issues don't apply to us. We don't have their scale. The things that they can do, we can't do. But how do we take advantage of some of those best practices, but in a smaller way, in a less consolidated, less scale manner? And many of the best practices are applicable to everyone. But certainly, no one's going to get the scale advantage of a Walmart. They're not going to get the scale advantage of Home Depot unless they are that size. But there are a lot of best practices that are transferable, that are in applications like ours or our competitors that anyone can use. But certainly, there's a massive advantage to being the size of Walmart. Primarily, their procurement opportunities, their scale buying, no one else can match. And no one else has that same distribution network. So the backhaul opportunities for them are far superior than anybody else in managing the distribution networks. But they're very smart about it. They have a massive supply chain management team. They do a lot of the work themselves. We today provide just a few of our solutions for them. We'd like to provide more, but a few of our solutions, in particular transportation management. But they've got a very sophisticated team that actually makes us better. And we are allowed to, within certain rules, leverage what we learn working with Walmart to include in our applications that others can benefit from. Thanks.
In the next 3 to 5 years, what do you see as being the top 3 challenges to the supply chain moving forward?
Yeah. Top 3 challenges of the supply chain moving forward, probably better than my opinion on it would be our customers' opinion. The number 1 issue customers are trying to get their hands around is inventory. That $5.5 trillion, the opportunity cost of not better matching demand with supply is, I would say, if you asked our customers, more than 60% would identify that as their primary issue, because it affects everything. It affects customer satisfaction, it affects profits, and it affects the amount of capital they need to raise to be able to run their business. And it's getting harder, not easier. Globalization has great benefits, as I was suggesting, but it makes it much harder to manage inventory. And they can't do it the old way, as I showed on one of my earlier charts, where they just carried safety stock at every level within their supply chain. Global supply chains are making that less and less an appropriate way to manage their business. So trying to look through their supply chain, understand where there's events, opportunities to consolidate, opportunities to better match demand and supply are probably the most important issue customers are wrestling with. Obviously, everyone's concerned about the price of oil and how transportation costs are rising, and no one expects that to go down. So what can they do about better optimizing their transportation network would be the most important issue there. And then I guess third, the driver shortage is a meaningful issue. There's a very difficult time folks managing lanes properly and getting product to market in an efficient way. And that problem is going to get considerably worse over the next decade. Thanks.
Has there been any repercussions yet for the China, like the pet food recall and now the toothpaste recall? Are people needing increased tracking, or are they leaving the markets? Are they going more domestic? Is there anything happening yet, or is it still kind of a adjustment phase?
From what we can tell so far, there isn't any dramatic change from a supply chain management perspective on how product will move in and out. There are tremendous cost advantages for manufacturing goods in China, but I'd be shocked if there aren't increased government requirements to validate the quality of goods manufactured, particularly anything that's ingested. So I do believe there'll be U.S. government FDA requirements to have better checks and balances. And I do think what you'll likely see is U.S. buyers, U.S. companies beginning to do things that manufacturers have done for a while. And that's putting people on location at the point of manufacture to inspect what's being manufactured to validate that it is of the highest quality. No one wants, I guess, depends on your perspective here, I guess we were sort of fortunate in that it was pet food and not human food where this issue came up. But toothpaste is another important thing that imagine everyone who has toothpaste manufactured in China has tossed that out. I travel a bunch, and I had a tube of toothpaste. Don't know when I got it, but it was manufactured in China and tossed that out. But I do think that it's a meaningful issue for the Chinese manufacturing consumer goods companies to address. But I do think those companies are going to react a lot like Johnson & Johnson did with Tylenol and put people in place to make sure that they can validate the quality and the safety of the products that are manufactured there. But there'll be a lot more coming out of that, I suspect, over the next 6 months. Yes.
As a CEO of a major company here in Atlanta, I'm switching subjects a little bit, but what do you think for Atlanta, what is our major competitive advantage? And since you have kind of a national perspective, you've been other places, and then what would you change about Atlanta to make us more competitive as a kind of a global city?
Yeah. For a logistics technology company, Atlanta is a very attractive location. It's very attractive from a logistics perspective in that part of Atlanta's heritage has been as a logistics hub, going back 40, 50 years. Hartsfield, other trucking capability all around this area has made it a natural place to attract logistics talent. So people from our industry that have deep domain knowledge are resident in this market, and we don't have too difficult a time finding experts that we can hire to help us build out that half of our value proposition. The other half is technology talent. And Atlanta's a pretty good technology town. It's no Boston or Silicon Valley, but it's pretty good. But I do think there's opportunities for us to improve there. What I believe we need is a little bit more vibrant startup activity. I think we have very good larger companies, the nice presence from IBM and some other companies that are general technology leaders. But what I think has happened over the last decade with the dot-com bust and so forth, a lot of the venture capital activity, technology investments in Atlanta have subsided. I think when I first moved here about 10 years ago, there were startups everywhere. Atlanta was littered with technology startups, and there were some pretty cool ideas coming out of those companies. We need to, a lot of other cities have the same issue, we need to find ways to reinvigorate that startup mentality because it drives innovation in every business. Thanks. Anything else I can answer for you? Very good. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you this morning. I'll be around for a while if anyone would like to catch up. But thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete. And before you go, we have a little gift for you here. It's a piece of glass artwork done by a local Athens artist, Paul Bendazunas. Also want to remind everybody when you're leaving the deck this morning, just mention Terry Third Thursday, and that'll be your free ticket out. And hope to see you in July when Susan McWhorter of Ignition is here. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.